You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Hristodoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and coming off the heels of a wild Thursday night football game where the Ravens took down the Bengals by 1 in a high-scoring affair, we kick off the week 1-0, and we're now diving into the remaining predictions that we have for week number 10 of the NFL. All the games on Sunday, the Monday night matchup as well. We'll go over it all game by game here. As always, I invite you all to comment down below. Would love to hear from you all. What are your picks? What are your predictions for the weekend? And a reminder, I'm not a betting channel. I'm not a gambling channel. We're here for fun. We're talking football. We're talking matchups, just kind of breaking down the games and having a good time here. But if you are a bettor, I invite you, hang out, fire some of your bets down in the comments. People love talking about that regardless of the case. And I just want to point out, and this might bite me in the ass by saying this, we have predicted pretty darn well the last few, honestly, like month and some change since week 5. No games less than 10 correct predicted. So we're doing pretty good. These are all just straight up. Who's going to win? Who's going to lose? Things are going pretty well right now. Pretty tough start to the season, but we've been able to kind of level out with a really good string of weeks here, and I'm hoping to do the same again here in week 10. That being said, with the bad luck now out in the air, and I'm sure we're going to wind up going under 500 this week because I said something, we're starting with the Giants and the Panthers overseas in Germany, and in an effort that I thought was supposed to be to try to get people to want to watch football, we are sending a 2-7 Giants team and a 2-7 Panthers team to face off in what is potentially going to be one of the ugliest football games of this season, unfortunately. These are two of the worst scoring offenses in the NFL. Giants rank 32nd, averaging just about 15.5 points per game. Panthers 29th, just over 16 points per game. And if I could have it my way, I wouldn't pick this game at all because this is just a matchup nightmare, and it's really tough to figure out just because of how poorly both these teams have played this season. That being said, there are a few things I'm kind of looking at that I think could dictate this matchup. The first one being the Giants' pass rush and how the Panthers hold up against them. They've been a really good unit this year. In fact, they are first in sacks with 35, and they actually have the best sack rate in the NFL right now at 11.5%. So they're having no trouble generating pressure, no trouble getting after the quarterback, and they're doing it extremely consistently on top of that. And when you have guys like Azeez Ojulari and Dexter Lawrence who have looked really good this year, and there has been some health issues with Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, obviously, but the fact that so many guys have stepped up and helped to create all that pressure and all those issues up front is huge for the Giants defense. That being said, Panthers offensive line, for what it's worth, pretty solid unit, all things considered, with how this season has gone for them. They only have 17 sacks allowed, which is tied for 8th lowest in the league, and they have the 7th lowest sack rate allowed. So this will be a really good test for the Panthers offensive line and just where exactly they are right now in this season. And also for Bryce Young, who has been given the reins once again here, and how he handles all that pressure if it does start leaking through. And then something else that I'm looking at here, and this is one of the things that I love about the NFL, because you get these guys that just kind of pop up and start to really explode as we go through the season here, coming out of nowhere. And that's going to be Tyrone Tracy and how this Panthers team plans on defending him. The reason I bring that up is because the Panthers are the worst run defense in the NFL in terms of yards per game allowed by an entire 10 yards, allowing 159 yards rushing per game with the second lowest run stuff rate according to Next Gen Stats. This could be a bit of a problem for them. Tyrone Tracy hasn't played a ton, but in the limited action we've got from him the last few weeks, he's looked pretty good. He's averaging about 5 yards per attempt, which is actually tied for 9th in the NFL right now. He's looked pretty good, and I do think that he could be a bit of a problem for this Panthers defense. Now, that being said, as far as injuries go, things that I'm really keeping an eye on here, I think just watching, especially for the Panthers, as we talked about their offensive line, two big guys on this injury report right now, Ikem Ekwonu and Taylor Moton. Both tackles have not participated in practice. Something worth keeping an eye on there, because if both those guys don't end up playing, or if maybe even just one of them is missing in this matchup here, you find yourself in a really tough spot against, again, the league's most effective pass rush right now, statistically speaking. As for the other side of things for the Giants, there's not a ton that I really see on here that I'm looking at. I mean, you either have guys that are just limited because they're being rested or whatever it may be. Darius Slayton is someone to keep an eye on. He might be missing from the matchup, which would be a tough blow to the wide receiver room. But overall, I'm not overly concerned about what I'm seeing from the injury side on the Giants. I think this game's going to be lower scoring. I don't think it's going to be super exciting. If you opt to not wake up early to watch this football game, especially if you're over on like the West Coast, I don't blame you. The game's played at what, like 9:30 in the morning over here on the East Coast. So if you're on the West Coast, 6:30 in the morning, if you don't want to wake up for that, I don't blame you. But I will say I'm taking the Giants. I think it'll be a contest, an NFL contest between the two. I have them winning 20-10. I'm not really expecting a ton of points in this one here. Maybe we get surprised and we get a little bit more action than I'm anticipating, but just based off of what we've seen from a lot of these overseas games, two offenses that can't really score, you have one defense that's actually pretty good, I don't really expect to see a lot. So, Giants, 20-10. Next game we'll look at as we move into the 1 o'clock window here. We have ourselves the Patriots heading into Chicago to take on the Bears, who are kind of in a tough way right now with some struggles over the last couple of weeks coming out of the bye week offensively. The passing attack has kind of flatlined, only 26 points scored between the two games. A lot going on with Chicago right now. Meetings galore with the players and coaching staff. But the big thing that I'm looking at here is going to be this Patriots O-line and how they hold up. There's a lot more shuffling going on with the offensive line. They have not been able to settle on a group of guys in any shape or fashion. Mike Onwenu's being moved to the left guard position based off what I've been reading here, so I'm really curious to see how this O-line holds up against the pass rush of the Chicago Bears. They're 7th in sack rate, they're 11th in sacks with 23, and the Patriots right now allowing the highest pressure rate in the league and the 6th fastest time to pressure as well. It just has not been great for the Patriots O-line, no matter whether it's Drake May or if it was Jacoby Brissett under center. The quarterbacks have been under pressure quickly and often. The other thing I'm looking at here is how this Patriots run defense handles DeAndre Swift. He's been looking really good for the most part over this season, barring like the first few weeks of the year until he really got the ball rolling here. But he's averaging about 87 yards per game since playing the Rams back in September, with 4 rushing touchdowns in that span as well. You couple that going up against the Patriots run defense that's allowing about 137 yards per game at this current moment here, which is 7th most in the NFL. They've allowed 10 rushing touchdowns on top of that. There's a good chance that even with some of the struggles that we've seen coming out of the bye for the Bears with the passing attack not really going well, if they lean on the run, ground and pound the football, the Chicago Bears could take advantage of the Patriots and just how weak they have been. And in the words of what Gerard Mayo had to say about the team, some of their soft tendencies on defense, there is definitely a case to be made that we could see some decent amount of running from this Bears team. The other thing that and this is something that goes really against the Patriots and just their current situation right now, is how this wide receiver room is going to be able to really do anything against the secondary over there in Chicago, even if Chicago is dealing with some injuries. And they have a pretty long list of guys that I am a little bit worried about as far as injuries go. I mean, you're looking at Jalen Jones and Jaquan Brisker as two guys in the secondary that have not participated in practice so far this week. You also have Kyler Gordon, who's been limited, Terrell Smith, who's been limited. So, there is some concern there, but what we've seen from Chicago over the last few weeks is that their defensive back room is pretty deep, and these guys can play. So while I am worried about, that a little bit, the Patriots wide receiver room as a whole worries me a whole lot more. These wide receivers average a target separation of just 3.4 yards per reception, which is one of the lowest in the NFL right now, and I don't really know if this group of guys is able to, if they're really able to generate anything against this group here. Again, health is a slight concern in Chicago, but when you look at the Bears and what they've been doing with even some of the injuries that they've been dealing with, they're allowing only 191 yards per game, which is good for 8th best in the league, just 5.7 yards per play through the air, 7th best, only 5 passing touchdowns allowed so far this season, which is best in the NFL. You're basically averaging coming into this game here about half a touchdown per game. So 1 touchdown every other game. Not too shabby, if you ask me. The Patriots are going to have their work cut out for them. I am genuinely concerned on how this is going to go. Being in Chicago makes me feel a lot more comfortable about this pick, but I do think I'm going to go with the Bears 24-17. I could see this Bears defense giving them a lot of problems, a lot of issues, and it's a rookie quarterback in Drake May. Chicago has a more They just have one of the more physical, one of the more talented defenses in the NFL, and I could see that group of guys giving a young guy like him a handful of issues, especially if they start maybe running some interesting blitzes here and there, or just, coverages that, pretending, throwing out a look that isn't necessarily the coverage you're actually in, things like that, just to kind of confuse him. I wouldn't be shocked if Chicago tries some things like that and it gives them some problems. So give me the Bears 24-17. Not ugly, but it's probably going to be another tough day offensively for the Patriots. Now we can go into Indianapolis as the Bills are taking on the Colts here. AFC clash here between a 7-2 Bills team and a 4-5 Colts team. Big thing that I'm looking at here, first and foremost, is going to be this Colts O-line and how they handle guys like Greg Rousseau on this defense. Greg Rousseau is having a really solid season here. 4.5 sacks, 34 pressures on the year. And when you look at what's been going on, especially at the tackle position for the Colts right now, and you can thank Next Gen Stats for this one here, the pressure rate allowed by both Bernard Raymond at the left tackle spot and Braden Smith at the right tackle spot is a little bit concerning. Bernard Raymond is allowing a pressure rate of about 11.7%, which is the 6th highest in the league at his position amongst starters. Braden Smith is 4th highest in the league as far as right tackles go at 13.6%. Again, at their respective positions, they are amongst the guys that allow the most pressure to get by them here. That does concern me a little bit, so just something worth keeping an eye on here, as this Colts team has not been perfect this year, and they've had some struggles offensively, whether it's with Anthony Richardson under center, or now we even saw it last week against the Vikings pass rush that's pretty freaking aggressive. They also struggled there, and you got a Buffalo Bills team with some guys that are dogs, so just a concern I have right off the top there. The other thing is just how this Colts defense plans on dealing with Josh Allen. The Bills are undefeated, 7-0, when Josh Allen has a passer rating of 95 or better. Once again, per Next Gen Stats with that number there. Shout out to NFL Pro. Numbers are sick over there with what they have. And then you also have a Colts team that has allowed a passer rating of 95 plus in five different games this season. The Colts defense, especially against the pass, is suffering right now with injuries in the secondary, and they have not been the healthiest along the defensive line. Thankfully, DeForest Buckner coming back will help this team out, but there is definitely some concern to be had. And the way we're seeing things shake out over in Buffalo with how balanced they are, with James Cook being such a good receiver out of the backfield, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, and now Amari Cooper's joined the fray, they're really starting to get hot, and this offense starting to get rolling, whereas the Colts defense, and I've complained about this a lot, but is just predicated on the whole rush 4, drop 7, our guys are better than your guys, so we'll beat you kind of deal. I don't know if the Colts defense is good enough to take down the Bills offense. So again, another scratch against Indianapolis for me on that part. And then you have Jonathan Taylor on the offensive side for the Colts. Obviously, fantastic running back, one of my favorite players in the league. Going up against the Bills' run defense that has been about average-ish to maybe slightly above or so given the week per se. But obviously Taylor, 500 yards on the season. He's averaging 4.8 yards per attempt. But he has been bottled up a couple of times as recently as last week against the Vikings. Again, who have a really good defensive front. They're one of the best teams against the run. The Bills will have their hands full. However, they are really good in some of the more nerdy stat numbers, second best run stuff rate in the NFL, but they do have some issues with the yards per attempt allowed being 6th highest in the league at 4.8. They're allowing about 123 yards per game on the ground. They have never, since the beginning of the season, been completely healthy as far as the linebacking room goes and a few other things. So there are some things worth keeping an eye on, but overall, I would take the Bills defense, even if they're not healthy, pretty much any week against the Colts. I was excited to see Joe Flacco start under center, but this past week against a really good Vikings defense, it did not look great. It really did not. And if Jonathan Taylor gets bottled up, it feels like this offense in Indianapolis gets stuck in the mud, so that does concern me there. I think the Bills defense could give them some problems, and I really don't know how this Colts defense is going to hold up against the Bills offenses that's kind of rolling right now. So I'll take Buffalo. Pretty good win in Indianapolis, 35-20. I think we're starting to see where Indianapolis lies, and the Buffalo Bills are going to give us a very prime example of that in this matchup. Next, we have the Minnesota Vikings, and I've got to say, if Trevor Lawrence is not playing in this game, for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I really don't know how this is going to go because I'm genuinely concerned about where Jacksonville is right now. Hosting Minnesota in this matchup here with Trevor Lawrence dealing with the shoulder injury in his non-throwing shoulder. It sounds like it's going to be Mac Jones. He was unlikely to play yesterday, and it just seems like more and more keeps coming out that is leaning towards Mac Jones getting the start. And Mac Jones, for what it's worth, you can say what you want about the situation that was in New England for him the last few years. And, maybe New England is more at fault than anything else for the trajectory of his career to this point here. But he struggles under pressure. And you have a Vikings defense that's coming in 9th in pressure rate, tied for 6th in sacks with 27. And they blitz more than anyone else with some of the most exotic looks you can imagine, causing just confusion for every single quarterback that they go up against. They are a very hard defense to figure out, and I have no idea how the Jaguars, if it's not Trevor Lawrence under center with Mac Jones, plan on dealing with that. Because of the way and again, growing up in New England, I've been able to watch the Patriots closely. I still reside in the New England area, so I get a front row seat to how the Patriots operate. And the biggest takeaway that I had, despite just the Patriots probably fumbling Mac Jones as a whole, with just some of the decision-making during the end of the Belichick tenure, was just he could not handle pressure well. And the offensive line regressed year over year, it felt like. And right now, the way things stand, I'm a little bit concerned about how Mac's going to look in this matchup against Minnesota. Also, on top of that, Jaguars' passing defense has not been great. It has been one of the worst in the league, if not the worst. Currently right now, only the second most yards per game allowed through the air at 264, but they lead the league in passing touchdowns allowed at 19, just under 20. Fourth most yards per game allowed to wide receivers. They're facing Justin Jefferson this week with Sam Darnold, who's been dealing. Obviously, Justin Jefferson right now leading the league with yards at 783, averaging 16.3 yards per reception. And Sam Darnold, one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL this season, just statistically speaking here, 17 passing touchdowns, a completion percentage near 70%, averaging 8.5 yards per attempt. There is a good chance that this Vikings offense is slicing and dicing what has been an ugly performance from the Jaguars this season against the pass. I think the big thing for Jacksonville, and it's something that I've hammered a lot, and although we have seen Tanks Bigsby get shut down this as recently as this past week against the Philadelphia Eagles with just 22 yards and under 3 yards per attempt, the Vikings, they boast one of the tougher run defenses in the NFL, or one of the best, honestly. Second fewest in the league in yards per game allowed, 3.8 yards per attempt. I mean, you have to maybe try to find some way to run the football because you can't just let the pass rush in Minnesota pin it back and get after the quarterback. You cannot, because it's not going to go well for Mac Jones and that offense there. Tank Bigsby has been pretty good this season, 500 yards, 5.5 yards per attempt. Maybe try to lean into that and find a way to run the football, but I'm not super high on this entire situation for Jacksonville right now. I'm leaning Minnesota very heavily, 31-10. I think this one's going to be ugly for Jacksonville, and it's just a combination of unfortunate situation, the current state of the team as a whole. I can't see this really going any other way than Vikings blowout W. So I'll take the Minnesota Vikings very handedly, 31-10, 21-point favorites in my opinion. Next, we have the Denver Broncos heading into Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. We got two really good defenses in this game here, as the Chiefs allowing about 18.5 points per game go up against the Broncos defense that's allowing about 18 points per game themselves. I really think that this game might end up being far lower scoring than a handful that we watched this week, just because of the state of these two defenses here. And I think it's going to be a gritty battle. With how imperfect we've seen the Chiefs offense be this year, there's a good chance that the Denver Broncos give them some issues. Both of the units are top 10 versus the run. You have Denver allowing about 108 yards per game, which puts them at 9th. Kansas City allowing only 83, which puts them at 3rd. And both teams sit right in the middle of the pack in terms of yards per game when running the football offensively, with Kareem Hunt obviously leading Kansas City and Javonte Williams leading the room over there in Denver. This is one of those games where I think you're going to be fighting for every single yard, whether it's on the ground, whether it's through the air. And the biggest thing here, realistically for me, for Kansas City's win condition, is going to be be pressuring Bo Nix and forcing him into making mistakes. We've talked about it a lot. Bo Nix against the pressure is a completely different quarterback than when he's comfortable in the pocket. He has a 42.8 passer rating, a 42% completion rate with a couple of touchdowns and 3 picks against pressure. Kansas City, for what it's worth, hasn't necessarily been stellar rushing the passer. They're 19th in pressure rate, 25th in sacks with only 17, 25th in sack rate with only 17 sacks on the season. So it hasn't been perfect. They went and added a guy like Josh Uche to maybe, help shore up the pass rush a little bit. I don't know how much of an impact he's going to actually make here, but I will say that if Kansas City can just make him uncomfortable, get after him, you have a shot at winning this football game. The other thing that I'm interested in here is DeAndre Hopkins and if Pat Surtain's the one that matches up against him. Because last week we saw 86 yards and a couple of scores from Hopkins. Obviously Surtain, he's a stud, one of the best, if not the best cornerback in the NFL right now. He lines up against whoever the best receiver is, and in my opinion on this offense right now, it's probably DeAndre Hopkins. Travis Kelce, you're not going to line up a corner on him all game. You're probably going to try to, mix the coverages with how you attack him over the middle, but you're going to rely more on your athletic linebackers than anything else. But the Pat Surtain versus DeAndre Hopkins battle is definitely something I'm looking forward to watching. As for who I think is going to win, like I said, I really think that a lot of this is going to come down to it's going to come down to defense. Which defense holds it together and shuts down the opposing offense, and that's kind of what I look at here. The Denver Broncos are one of the best pass rushes themselves this season, and Patrick Mahomes has not been good under pressure. So I know we talked about the pressuring of Bo Nix and just how poor he has been. Patrick Mahomes has not been perfect either under pressure, and that is definitely something worth keeping in mind. But as I've been saying pretty much all season, I have a really hard time betting against the Chiefs, Mahomes, and Andy Reid, and I think we saw last week what this offense can really be with DeAndre Hopkins catching a couple of touchdown passes, opening things up for some of the other playmakers on the offense. Like Kelce walked away from that same game with, I believe, 14 receptions for 100 yards. Maybe it was more, but the last number I saw was that. But there is a good chance that things really start to open up for KC going forward. Like last week for the Chiefs was the best offensive performance we have seen from them this season. And coincidentally, or not coincidentally, it's because DeAndre Hopkins is now forcing people to look his way, and you're not able to triple coverage Travis Kelce the way it's been kind of going for some defenses right now, and that's only going to open things up for Worthy. The running game's been solid in KC. I like the Chiefs 21-17, but it's going to be a fight. This is not going to be a Chiefs runaway type game. Broncos defense is going to give them problems. I wouldn't be shocked to see a Patrick Mahomes interception or two, but I think the same could be said the other way for Bo Nix as well, and that might be kind of the difference maker, is just the better quarterback wins the football game. Now we have an NFC South matchup to look at here, and this is, again, not another great game because the Saints firing head coach Dennis Allen are in a really bad way right now, and you could probably be looking at this matchup going, well, do the Saints get like that interim head coach bump that some teams get here? But for me, just the current situation that the Saints are in, this is a team that's heading towards the final, you're hitting the big red button and finally resetting, getting out of the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era. It felt like this is a team that's been kicking the can down the road, trying to keep what was a pretty good roster together at the tail end of the Drew Brees era and Sean Payton era, and trying to just make it work by fitting in a guy like Derek Carr. But unfortunately, it seems like time is up, with so many injuries just killing this Saints team right now. I mean, you have Chris Olave, who has once again not practiced this week. Cedric Wilson, once again, has not practiced this week to this point here. Your wide receiver room still extremely thin. You're still dealing with injuries on the offensive line. You have injuries on your defense as well. I don't really know how this Saints team gets it done here, just because of the situation that they're in. Interim head coach now. Offense has not looked great. They're dealing with a ton of injuries. The defense is suffering and allowing teams to move quite a bit here. And I really don't know where this Saints team goes. I mean, you look at the Falcons, especially in their passing game, 246 yards per game. They're a top 10 team doing so. You're going up against the Saints defense that's a bottom 10 in yards allowed per game. Two teams that are passing the football here. And it's again, an injured O-line. You at least know that the Falcons' pass rush isn't something that's super impressive. They are one of the worst in the NFL with only 9 sacks this season and the second worst pressure rate. But I don't really know how the Saints get this one done. I really don't. It's a divisional matchup, so they find a way to win, possibly, but I'm leaning Atlanta, even if it is in New Orleans, even if there is that, interim head coach bump where players are maybe a little bit more motivated to play well because they know that the implosion of the season is coming at the end of the year where they're going to hit the reset button and guys could lose their jobs and whatnot. That always happens, but I like the Falcons. I feel pretty comfortable about them right now. I'll take them 28-17. Good victory for them here and just catching a Saints team that is kind of heading towards a potential first pick in the NFL draft this year. Now we'll look at an NFC clash between the 49ers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Christian McCaffrey finally set to make his season debut. Not a moment too soon. The 49ers need McCaffrey. Sitting at 4-4 right now. Playoff hopes are teetering right now. They are on the outside looking in. They're technically the number 9 seed right now in the NFC. So they are outside the playoffs looking in at this current point here. But luckily you're catching a Buccaneers team that has been bit by the injury bug, especially in the wide receiver room, pretty hard. The 49ers have still managed a pretty strong rushing attack without Christian McCaffrey. They're averaging about 160 yards per game, 4th best in the NFL right now, even without him. Him coming back into the fold is going to not only push that number probably further, but also open up what they can do in the passing game as well, being that Christian McCaffrey can not only run the football, but if he wanted to be, could arguably be one of the best slot receivers in the NFL. You look at the way the Bucs have defended the run this year, not great. About 131 yards per game allowed on the ground. They have one of the highest yards per attempt averages at 4.9 per attempt allowed this season as well. It's good for 5th highest in the league. I really think that there is some concern in just what is going on with, I almost said Buffalo, Tampa Bay, and where they currently stand, both defensively and then just offensively, because the other question I have for this game here is who the hell is catching passes from Baker Mayfield right now? Obviously, you have the Godwin and Evans injuries, knock those two guys out, but Jalen McMillan and Sterling Shepard both have not practiced Wednesday and Thursday. If either one of those guys are missing, or if both of them are missing, worst case scenario, I don't know who's catching passes over there. I really don't. Like you're talking like literally 5th, 6th, 7th string guys. Like if that even exists on their roster. And Cade Otton's been eating a lot, and a lot of the passes have also been going to the running backs. But like for what it's worth, the 49ers, they're only ranked 14th against the pass, so they have been letting some teams get behind them. But when it comes to what tight ends have been able to do, they've got a pretty good linebacking room over there with some pretty athletic freaks led by Fred Warner. They've been able to keep tight ends in check, and they've allowed the 5th fewest yards per game to tight ends. So I genuinely have no idea how this is going to go for their passing attack. Thankfully, Baker Mayfield is a guy that he does not give an F, and he will just throw to whoever he needs to. He's a slinger. He is a gunslinger. He's a gamer type of guy. He's not afraid to throw that football, and he'll do it every single week, whether it's Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, or if he's just throwing to some random practice squad guy that week, like he showed it last week, he'll do it. But I'm curious to see how this is going to go for Tampa Bay. I think you're really leaning heavily on Bucky Irving, Rashad White, and Sean Tucker. Again, just running the football, but B, catching passes as well, as we've kind of seen from them. Tampa Bay, they're averaging about 127 yards per game this season on the ground here, and I think it's going to be necessary for them to run the football and run the football effectively if they want to maintain control of this game and not let San Francisco maybe start to get too far ahead, because again, the Bucs defense has been prone to letting teams move and score, and you need to control the ball against this 49ers team, especially with McCaffrey coming back. Like the ceiling for the offense in San Fran has gone up significantly now, and the 49ers, they're a really good run defense. They're 6th best in the NFL in terms of yards per game allowed. Their work's cut out for them in Tampa Bay, and I don't know if they're going to have enough in the tank. It's the injuries more than anything that really scare me, which is why I'm leaning San Francisco for this one here. I have them winning 28-23, mainly because I do think that the 49ers defense hasn't been perfect this year, and also because I trust that the Bucs will fight to the very end. Baker Mayfield is a guy that will not quit until the very last second of the game, and I think we've seen that from the Buccaneers in games where they've won, and even in games where they're losing and down and out, and they're still fighting to the very end of the finish line. So I think the Bucs can maybe hang around, but it's going to be a tough one for them to win, so I'll take San Francisco again, 28-23. Now, this next matchup is a big one here because both of these teams kind of need like a signature win against another really good opponent. So this game is pretty crucial for both of them. The Pittsburgh Steelers are sitting at 6-2. Commanders are sitting at 7-2. Both these teams fighting to try and stay in the lead of their divisions right now, as the Commanders have the Eagles sitting right behind them and the Pittsburgh Steelers have the Ravens sitting right behind them. The first and most important question in this game, in my opinion, is how Jaden Daniels handles the Steelers defense, because we all know Mike Tomlin has a pretty damn good record against rookie quarterbacks, and for what it's worth, Pittsburgh loves to run crazy blitz packages. They love to confuse, especially young quarterbacks with, exotic looks like we mentioned earlier with Minnesota. Very similar thing goes on over there in Pittsburgh. They're allowing just about 15 points per game right now, which is good for second best in the NFL, and only 90 yards per game on the ground rushing, which is good for fourth best. They have let teams move through the air, but this is a team that does not let opponents finish drives. And with Jaden Daniels, obviously as good as he's looked, a lot of people have argued, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, maybe even MVP of the season, because he's played that well this season as a rookie. I mean, he's averaging 8.5 passing yards per attempt. He's averaging 71.5% completion percentage. Both of those are good for top 5 in the league. He has the second, for you stat nerds out there, second best in EPA per play. Like, he has been money for this Commanders team. So I'm very curious to see how he fares against the Steelers defense that is typically very, very good and a nightmare for rookie quarterbacks to go up against. The other thing I'm interested in is what the Steelers try to do offensively, and if maybe they try to lean into the run a little bit more. And the reason I say that is because Washington has allowed teams to move a lot on the ground, about 143 yards per game allowed, which is putting them in the top 5 most in the NFL with a 5.1 yard per attempt average. Najee Harris is sitting near 500 yards with about a 4.4 yards per attempt number as the lead back over there. They're not overly relying on the run the way they kind of were earlier in the season with Justin Fields. Russell Wilson has changed up the offense a little bit, and they're able to throw a lot more, but I wouldn't be shocked to see them maybe ground and pound a little bit more in this game here, especially if they find some struggles passing the football. And we've seen Washington making moves to try to get better. You go and get Marshawn Lattimore. You now have to deal with him in that defense there. So I'm interested to see what the Steelers kind of do, but don't be too surprised if you see Najee Harris getting an opportunity to pound the rock a bit with Jaylen Warren running behind him. Then, of course, the pass rush in Pittsburgh. They went and added Preston Smith at the trade deadline here. You got a Commanders offensive line that looks vastly improved from the way they were last season. And I do think this kind of goes back to, again, Jaden Daniels and how he fares against the Steelers here. Statistically speaking, the Steelers are like average or so as a pass rush. They have 19 sacks, which is only good for 23rd in the league, but they're tied for 17th in sack rate, 13th in pressure rate, so about average or so, give or take. But it's those crucial moments with guys like TJ Watt that make those massive plays when you need it most, where they really step up, that Pittsburgh really shines. And those are those moments that I'm curious to see how Jaden Daniels reacts, where he has a TJ Watt breathing down his neck, Cam Hayward blowing things up in the middle of that offensive line there. So I look at that. You look at what Washington's doing. They've been a pretty good team as far as protecting Jaden Daniels goes, but I will say I do think some of that does get disguised by just how mobile Jaden Daniels is and how good he is in the pocket and being able to move around, and just the threat he has with his legs forces defenses to maybe be like just half a second slower to react, because you never really know what he's going to do because he can take off on you. But overall, it's an interesting matchup and one that I think could dictate how this game goes. As for who I think is going to win, this is a tough one. This is probably the hardest game for me to pick this week rather. Not the hardest game this week. And it being in Washington makes me really, really like the Commanders here. Like home field advantage, I think in this matchup means a lot, just because you're in front of your home crowd, not necessarily travel or anything like that, because these two teams are fairly close to each other, geographically speaking. But I do think having that home field advantage of just that home crowd with you would be nice. But in Washington, that means you're really close to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh fans travel very, very well. So I'm not too worried about that. And I'm really interested in how Jaden Daniels fares against Mike Tomlin's defense here. I do think the Steelers get the better of them. And this one, in a tight contest, goes Pittsburgh's way, 24-23. I think this is going to be fun, But right now, with just the track record that Mike Tomlin has against rookie quarterbacks and also just how good this defense is in Pittsburgh, I'm having a very hard time picking against them. Now we have the Tennessee Titans going into Los Angeles to take on the Chargers. This is a game that I think we're going to see a really big battle in the trenches. You obviously have Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry III on the defensive side of Tennessee. And then on the flip side of that, you got Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack over in LA. I think that whichever offensive line ends up holding up best winds up putting their team in the best success to win this football game here. You have two really tough defenses, just like gritty, grindy type of defenses that have some big names on both sides, and I really think that battle in the trenches is going to be huge here, and both of these offensive lines are going to be put to the test here. And interestingly enough, somewhat different ways, because you look at LA and the way they're set up, you got two guys coming around the edges getting after the quarterback from there, but Jeffrey Simmons is a game wrecker from the inside, and having a guy like Harold Landry to pair with him is really nice. But I do think it's going to be key to watch that there. The other thing is the quarterback situation with Tennessee and who we're going to get. It sounds like Will Levis has a really good opportunity of playing this week. They've been ramping him up in practice. He's been getting ready to go. And of course, you've had Mason Rudolph, who's been playing in his absence as well. But you have them going up against a guy like Justin Herbert. And just in the quarterback battle alone, if I was to pick one or the other, I don't really think I need to take too much time to consider. It's going to be Justin Herbert. I trust Justin Herbert far more than I do either one of these quarterbacks, regardless of who it ends up being under center. And honestly, I probably trust Justin Herbert far more, not Justin Herbert more. If I was to pick between Will Levis and Mason Rudolph, excuse me. I get that wrong all the time. I'm sorry. Mason Rudolph. If I keep saying Kyle, I'm sorry. He's the tight end. Mason Rudolph. I probably trust Mason Rudolph more than I do Will Levis, just because of some of the wacky turnovers we have gotten from Levis, but I'm taking Herbert 10 times out of 10. And the other thing I'm really concerned about right now is Tony Pollard being unavailable for the Titans. He has been very big for them in terms of just the offense being able to move the football consistently. If he's not there, you're leaning on Tajay Spears and whoever else they have in the running back room over there in Tennessee. But I have a really hard time taking anything against LA in this one here. I really like the Chargers in this matchup. Their defense has been really good. The offense is starting to find its footing a little bit every single week now as we get further and further removed from like the unhealthy start of the Chargers at the beginning of the season where like you had the ankle sprain to Justin Herbert. You were missing both your offensive tackles. The team was just kind of in a tough way. The offense feels like they're starting to find themselves. Ladd McConkey's looked really good, and even Quentin Johnston, he's even finding some success now. So it seems like they're starting to figure themselves out as an offense, and for Tennessee, there's just a lot going wrong right now for me to want to go pick them in this one here. I do think they can keep it close, but I like the Chargers 23-13. But if Tennessee keeps it a little bit closer than that, because the defense is a tough unit, I'll give them that. I did say a few weeks ago I didn't really believe in them, but now that I've been watching them more and more, it seems like they are maybe better than I thought, so I will give them credit there. Again, you got dogs up in the middle of that defensive front. Like Jeffrey Simmons is no slouch by any means, so they can keep it close, but I like the Chargers 23-13, lower scoring contest. Now we have, and this is an interesting matchup, despite the records, 3-6 New York Jets heading into Arizona, 5-4 to take on the Cardinals. First thing I'm looking at here, Sauce Gardner versus Marvin Harrison Jr. Who wins the matchup here? Gardner's allowed 18 receptions for 326 yards and a touchdown so far this season, according to NFL's Next Gen Stats. Marvin Harrison sitting on 445 yards with 5 touchdowns on the year. He's had some up and down games. He's had some really good games, and he's had some games where he's maybe disappeared a little bit. I am curious to see how he fares against Sauce Gardner. This is going to be a fun matchup to watch. Two really young, up-and-coming guys. Marvin Harrison, he's got the pedigree, the work ethic of legends that people talk about all the time. Like, this is a matchup that, if all goes according to plan for Marvin Harrison, is one that you should always be anticipating seeing every single season going forward if it's coming to us, because you're not going to see it often, but it is two of the best in the league. Or if, again, all goes well for Marvin Harrison, it would end up being like two of the best in the league doing what they're doing going head to head. I'm very excited to see how that matches up, but also for the Jets defense as a whole, how they plan on handling Kyler Murray here. Kyler Murray has the second highest passing success rate outside the pocket, according to Next Gen Stats, at about 54, or basically 55%, round up the number, basically 55%. When he gets outside the pocket, he's a menace, and I don't think that really surprises anyone. Everyone is well aware of Kyler Murray's game and how he operates. He loves to extend plays with his legs, and when he's running with the football, averaging 8.1 yards per attempt, he's racked up 350 yards with his legs this season. He's a nightmare to defend, especially when he gets moving outside the pocket and just takes off as a whole. I'm curious to see how the Jets are able to slow him down, but as far as the Cardinals go defensively, the big thing that I'm looking at here is how they handle Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson. This is kind of a matchup nightmare, in my opinion, for the Arizona Cardinals, in that Davante Adams finally had like his figure it out type of game. 7 receptions, 91 yards, and a touchdown against Houston last week. And then Garrett Wilson's obviously been doing Garrett Wilson things, and his production has even ticked upward more now that defenses have to account for Davante Adams since he's gotten there. But I mean, he's sitting on 60 receptions for over 600 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's on pace to smash all his career bests right now. He's already surpassed his touchdown mark, and he's working on his receptions and yardage number, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's sorted out in the next few weeks. So you got yourself your hands full if you're Arizona, and Arizona's been winning really good games, and I've got to give them credit because they're literally in the lead for the NFC West right now. They are, at this current moment, the number 4 seed in the NFC. So I need to give Arizona some credit because I've been coming on here and talking about talent depleted roster and how are they going to beat this team and how are they going to beat this team. And then they come out and they do it weekly, and that's why they're sitting at 5-4, leading their division right now. But the Giants are in a spot where if they lose this football game here, their season is all but done. You're in the thick of the fight as the Arizona Cardinals. The Jets have everything to lose going forward. You can't afford another loss basically the rest of the season. It's a gotta-have-it game for New York, and that's why I am kind of leaning the Jets on this one here. I think it'll be tight. I think it's going to be up to the Jets defense to win this football game. Hopefully the signs we've been seeing from the Jets on offense continue to grow and the passing attack can open up some more. I'm going to take the Jets 23-20, but I am not nearly as confident in this game as I thought I would be maybe a few weeks ago, as Arizona continues to beat teams that nobody expects them to beat. So Jets win, but if the Cardinals win this one, I'm not surprised. Next, the Eagles heading into Dallas to take on the Cowboys here. Eagles at 6-2, Cowboys sitting at 3-5. No Dak Prescott, and potentially no Dak Prescott for a month or more with that hamstring injury he's dealing with. It's going to be Cooper Rush time in Dallas. You have CeeDee Lamb status that is currently up in the air, but you are set to get someone very important for your defense back in Micah Parsons. That being said, there are still injuries that I'm concerned about with Dallas, and it makes me very inclined to fade them in this game here. Saquon Barkley has been on a mission this season since being let go by the Giants, and he is killing it. 925 yards on the ground, 5.9 yards per attempt. Both of those put him in the top 3. He only has 6 rushing touchdowns, but he's got some receiving touchdowns as well. He's been doing everything and then some for the Eagles offensively. The Dallas Cowboys, like I said, getting Micah Parsons back is going to be huge, but they're still missing guys like DeMarcus Lawrence. They're not completely healthy up front and just on the defense as a whole. Allowing 109 yards per game to running backs, which is 10th most in the NFL, and they've allowed the 3rd most rushing yards per game this season overall. That does not bode well for Dallas. Philadelphia, if they can, loves to run the football. It is their bread and butter. Run the football, go for it on 4th and 1 with the tush push, but if they can ground and pound you into submission, they absolutely will. They are designed to do that in Philadelphia. The other thing, concerns I have with defensively, again, injuries, the secondary. Deron Bland still not participating in practice. You also have Trayvon Diggs, who's been limited. He's probably going to play. I'm not worried about it, but my question is just how healthy is he? And you've got to deal with guys like Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert. There's a lot to deal with right now over there in Philadelphia. Saquon Barkley and his ability to catch out of the backfield. Your linebacking room's a little bit thin as well right now. Injuries. I have personally no reason in my mind to take Dallas for the win. other than like this is like their season on the line and they've got to do something here. But Dallas has not inspired me enough in their losses and even in their wins for me to feel like they can pull this one off here. It's a divisional matchup. It's in Dallas. Obviously, there's a chance they can win, but I'm taking Philadelphia 28-13. Dallas is in such a tough spot, and it's really unfortunate that this team's being just dismantled by injuries, but this is the state that they're in. Philadelphia, on the other side, they're pretty damn healthy, and I don't really know how Dallas comes out with the win here. And now we look at one of my favorite matchups, not only of the week, but of the season. We've got ourselves the Detroit Lions taking on the Houston Texans. First question comes to mind. Can this Texans offense, keep pace with the Detroit Lions? The Lions are currently averaging about 32 points per game right now. League best by a decent amount. Texans scoring about 22 points per game, middle of the pack at 17th. The biggest thing that the Texans need to do if they want to hang on in this matchup is find a way to stop this Lions rushing attack. Everyone's talking about Jared Goff, and don't get me wrong. What he is doing is crazy, like absolutely insane. He is on a mission. He is so efficient right now. I think his completion percentage is hanging somewhere around like 84% or something like that in the last like 5 or 6 games he's played. It's a wild number, and what he's doing right now is incredible. But what the Lions are doing up front on that offensive line, and what these two running backs and David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs are doing in Detroit cannot be overstated. They are killing it right now on the ground, averaging about 152 yards per game with the 5th best rushing success rate in the NFL. You're going up against a pretty good defense that has been able to find success stopping the run. They're about 12th in yards per game allowed, but they have the 5th best run stuff rate in the league. So we have two pretty good oppositions as far as one stopping the run and one running the football coming head-to-head and colliding here. This game will be, in that aspect, about who the tougher team is, in my opinion. And right now, I don't know if there's a tougher team in the NFL than Dan Campbell's football team. That is, like, grit is like, you look up the definition of grit in the dictionary, and it's a picture of the entire Lions roster with Dan Campbell smiling, because this is what he wanted from his football team, is a tough, gritty team that will beat you into submission if you let them. The other thing I'm looking at here on the flip side of things is how this Texans O-line holds up against the pass rush in Detroit. They obviously went and got Zadarius Smith at the trade deadline. Big need there with Aiden Hutchinson going down for the season. Houston, currently right now as it stands, after allowing 8 sacks against the Jets, sits at 31 on the season, tied for second most with the Patriots. And we talk about how bad that O-line is over there. I don't think the Texans are on that level, but they have shown some issues protecting C.J. Stroud. Detroit, on the other hand, as far as their pass rush goes, 20 sacks in the season, not a crazy number, but a good number, and then 23rd in overall sack rate. If the Texans O-line looks anything like they did last week, there's absolutely no shot they keep up with Detroit. I at all. You couple that with the fact that there are some decent injuries to keep an eye on here, guys that are not participating in practice on the Texans end that you need to keep an eye on, because that could dictate this matchup. Will Anderson Jr. has not participated in practice Wednesday or Thursday. Foley Fatukasi has not practiced Wednesday or Thursday. Kenyon Green on the offensive line has not practiced Wednesday or Thursday. Dameon Pierce, obviously Joe Mixon's your starter, but he's had a pretty solid season himself, has not participated Wednesday and Thursday. You're thin in the running back room now as well. Jake Hansen was limited on Wednesday, but did not participate on Thursday. Linebacker dealing with an ankle injury. There are a lot of injuries to keep in mind in this matchup. The other thing is, I don't necessarily know if Zadarius Smith is even going to play or not. I know we obviously talked about the addition of him and what he could mean, but it doesn't seem like it's clear because he is not injury related, not practicing. So it's like a personal matter. I don't know what that is, what that's all about. But whether he plays or not, I don't really think matters too much, because pass rush and getting after the quarterback, getting those sacks, even without Zadarius Smith, has been solid. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson being gone is hurting that. But again, my concern is about the O-line over in Houston and what's going on over there. and why they're letting up so much pressure, why they're letting up so many sacks more than anything else. This is going to be a tough matchup, a gritty matchup. It's in Houston. Real good opportunity with Nico Collins expected to potentially play in this matchup too. That opens up another layer to the offense. You lose Stephon Diggs, you lose the game right after losing him, but now Nico Collins is coming back, and Nico Collins catching footballs from CJ Stroud, that's one of the best combinations, quarterback wide receiver in the NFL. There's a lot to consider in this game here, health-wise, who's going to be playing, who's not going to be playing. It's going to be good. I think it's going to be good. This will be a fun Sunday Night Football matchup. I said that about the Thursday night game as well. I've kind of got that same feeling for this one here, but I am leaning the Detroit Lions. I personally have them as the second best team in the NFL right now behind the Chiefs. And Lions fans, you can hate me for saying that. We're not talking that right now. But with that being said, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I believe in this Lions team. I think they're the best team in the NFC without question. And right now the Texans are in not a perfect spot at the current moment, and the Lions are just rolling. Maybe the Texans are the team to put that to a stop, but some of those injuries that we talked about make me think that this is not the team that's going to do it. So give me the Lions, 28-24. I think we're going to get some fireworks. It's going to be a good time, but I do think the Lions ultimately ground and pound their way to victory. And then to wrap up the week, we're looking at the Miami Dolphins heading into the Rams, Monday Night Football in Los Angeles. There is strong potential right now for both Steve Avila and Jonah Jackson to return on the offensive line this week. The Rams getting 2 starting offensive linemen back in the same week would pay off dividends for this offense here. We've already seen the uptick in offensive production for the Rams since Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp have come back into the fold here. If they're going to get healthier along the offensive line as well, this Rams team is getting hot and putting it together at the absolute right time. I think we're potentially going to see some points in this game here. Pretty high-scoring affair kind of deal. The way I look at it, Rams right now averaging 28 points per game since Kupp and Nacua came back. The running game has come to life with Kyren Williams. And again, you're shoring up the offensive line now. Like, that number is only going to potentially climb. You look at the Dolphins, since Tua's been back, 27 points per game. Both averages for these two teams with these returns well above what their actual season average is. The other thing I'm looking at here is going to be the pass rush of both these teams, because both these offenses love to throw the football if they can. They can both run, but they both love to throw the football first. They both have really talented wide receiver 1s and 2s in Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, and then on the other side, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill. The big thing, though, for the Rams, they are getting so much out of Jared Verse and out of Braden Fisk. It's kind of crazy because you're sitting on a 42.8 pressure rate, best in the NFL right now, with the 8th best sack rate in the NFL. Couple that with the fact that you're getting the production from those two guys, Byron Young, if you add him into the mix, those 3 guys are, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Rams are the only team to be able to claim this right now. They have 3 guys on that defensive front that are in the top 35 of the entire NFL in pressure rate by a player. 3 different guys in the top 35 of the league. They are getting after quarterbacks and making them uncomfortable. And Tua, if he's uncomfortable, can be prone to making mistakes. We have seen it happen when the offense in Miami, which is very much built off of the operation and the operation performing correctly and in sync the way it needs to be done because they do so much. If that operation gets disrupted, things can go wrong. We watched Tua throw 3 picks when things like that were going wrong a handful of weeks ago before he went down with a concussion against the Bills. Like, it's there. Miami on the other side, 30th in sack rate this season, but they are 8th in overall pressure rate at about 37%. So I do think pass rush is key for this game here. The other thing I'm looking at is going to be just the rushing attack as a whole. Which one of these teams runs the football more effectively? We obviously know Miami loves running the football. Devon Achane, Mostert. Like, they love doing their thing over there with the running backs. The Rams, on the other side, Kyren Williams has really started to get going now that Nakua and Kupp are both on the football field, and I expect to see that continue to get better and better as the weeks go on. Rams right now, season average, 26th in the NFL in rushing yards per game. I don't think that actually is... The number is there. The number is what it is, but I don't think it is an actual representation of what this rushing attack can be now that they actually have guys that are threatening in the passing game for defenses to account for. I think that's going to start to open up. Kyren Williams is extremely talented, and I think he's going to start to feast, so don't be too surprised. There's going to be a lot of points in this game. Again, I think we are set up for a really good week of primetime games. We already had one in the Thursday night game with the Ravens and Bengals. Sunday night should be fun with two really good teams in the Lions and Texans. And honestly, it might not sound like it Rams Dolphins because of this, where the teams are record-wise. I do think, though, that this game ends up being really fun as well, and it caps off a fun week of football. I'm going to take the Rams 30-28. A lot of points, a lot of scoring, high-energy offenses. I think it's going to be a good time, but I like the Rams by a hair. Matty Stafford, Kupp, Nakua, Williams. I think they might just be a little too much for a Dolphins defense that I have not been super high on this year. But those are my picks for week number 10 of the NFL. Again, comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts. Let me hear your opinions. Who do you like? Who do you dislike? If you like to talk betting, feel free to do so. I'm always curious to see what you all are betting on anyways, even though I don't do it myself. But fire away in that comment section. And as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.